Ashley, do you have 12 noon?
I do. Just 1 second, and we're live now.
Okay, we're live, folks. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dale Cook. We're about to start the commissioners meeting, town meeting for the town of Dewey Beach on September 11th at 12 noon. I'll do a roll call opening and you say your name and say you're here when I call your name, please. Commissioner Bauer,
Present.
Commissioner Jazinski,
Here.
Commissioner Moskowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Persinger,
Here.
and Mayor Commissioner Cook is here. So we're all present. We have the town attorney online also, and the town interim town manager, Jim Deedy. So everybody that needs to be online is online at the moment. If we'll stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If everybody would remain standing for 1 minute. I just want to say that I'm sorry to announce that Emily Carr, one of our prominent business owners and prominent citizens in town, passed away in between the last two meetings. Just a moment of silence, please, for Emily Carr and for all the troops and all the people that we lost in 9/11.
Passed away. Emily Carr passed away.
Thank you very much. Now I can put my hat back on. Nobody would know me without my hat. You have the agenda before you. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion
Second.
to- Who made the first motion?
I did.
David? David
Then Paul
Moskowitz
seconded.
Made the motion. Commissioner Bauer seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Moskowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Persinger. Commissioner Persinger. Your mic.
He's on mute.
Your mic. Commissioner Persinger, you're on, there you go.
Aye.
All right, thank you, sir. Commissioner Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Jazinski,
Aye.
and Commissioner Mayor Cook says aye, unanimous. Announcements and updates. This is where we're going to do a little bit of discussion of the announcements and update on telephone poles or utility poles being installed in the town of Dewey Beach. We had it online, had the display online and had it, you all should have it in your computer. There are a number of utility companies or telephone companies, telecommunications companies actually, that are coming through our town now and have been in Rehoboth, and they've already been in other towns. They're going through, they're planning telephone poles for telecommunications. And to make a long story short, it's every telecommunications provider will be doing this. We do not have a lot of say in the matter. It was passed by the FCC, federal regulations, and passed down to the states along with state regulations, and the state right-of-ways and the town right-of-ways are going to be used for telephone poles and for 5G service. You all have a map. I'm not going to go through every single map, but that map shows you the placement of poles. The biggest one that I've been worried about, and Jim and I, Mr. Dedes and I have been walking around town about the placement along at the ends of the streets at the ocean side. We've been successful in getting a couple of them moved, but again, we don't have a lot of say in the matter, and it worries me that we have multi-million-dollar homes on the ocean side and they're placing telephone poles at the end of the street. And we already have some telephone poles and I didn't want more, but we don't have a whole lot of say in the matter. I wanted to make it public in this meeting so that you all can understand what's going on when you get questions. Any questions from you guys? Commissioner Jazinski.
Yeah, just real quick, just so everyone knows, could you explain the difference between the green icons and the larger yellow icons?
Well, you should have a second posting that came with it. Verizon, let's see, the Verizon is to use place poles where the green dots are located on the attachment. Number two, Verizon wants to use the life-saving station flagpole to mount their 5G. That's the blue dot on Dagsworthy. And each of the squares are locations of poles to be placed by a third-party company, SQF LLC. At this time, they don't have any cell company that's slated to use their poles, but they have been given permission to place the poles. The squares located on Chesapeake and Carolina are requested sites. Those requested sites are on town property. The rest of them are on state right of way. Commissioner Jazinski, did you have any other?
No, I just thought the public would want to understand what the different icons meant if they were looking at the map, that's all.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions or suggestions or other than what they can do with their poles? So, you know, I would just soon have them take them away and not place any of them, but it's not our options. Rehoboth has already been fighting this. If you noticed in the paper the other day, they're talking about Verizon is going to put 33 of them on their boardwalk. So they're not going to have poles, though. They're going to have what looks like a light fixture, a new form of a light fixture. The only type of pole that we're going to have different other than a wooden pole is the flagpole at the life-saving station is going to be the same type flagpole that they put in at the Chamber of Commerce in Fenwick Island. Jim Dedes and I went down and looked at it, and we're going to get a new flagpole out of it. It's a little different shape of a flagpole, a little thicker flagpole, but it should be fine for us. Any further questions? All right, thank you very much. Committee reports.
Well, point of order, we didn't do the minutes for August 14th.
You're absolutely correct, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate your minutes. You all have the minutes for August 14th. And is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Bauer, motion to accept. Is there a second?
Commissioner Persinger seconds.
Commissioner Persinger, second. Is there any further discussion?
Just to raise the point, the July 10th executive session minutes, we have to address at the next meeting.
Thank you. Is there any further comments on the minutes for August 14th, 2020? Hearing none, I'll give a roll call for all in favor. Commissioner Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Jazinski,
Aye.
Commissioner Moskowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Persinger,
Aye.
and Mayor Commissioner Cook. Aye, unanimous. So, Planning and Zoning Committee, I was originally scheduling Mr. Persinger to make a comment on this, but I would like him to hold off for a little bit until Mr. Thompson would like to give the report for Planning and Zoning.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm getting a signal every now and then that my connection is unstable, so hopefully this is going to work out.
Not talking about you, is it, sir?
Pardon me?
It's not talking about the owner of the home, it's talking about where the signal is, right?
It's talking about my signal, my connection to this
Right.
Zoom meeting. Yeah.
Right.
So
Ashley's giving me the signal to be quiet.
the Planning Commission has been tasked to look into a couple of subjects by the commissioners. One was to take a look at the property maintenance provisions available to the inspections office and to recommend whether they need to be beefed up. The Planning Commission has held a public hearing and developed a draft ordinance to that effect, and met in, I believe it was late August, and is not ready to make recommendations and anticipates a second public hearing on that subject. And additionally, the Planning Commission was asked to review the bulk standards in the zoning code that are evidenced primarily in Table 2, and make recommendations for improvements in a number of areas to make the enforcement of those zoning standards more simple and understandable to the public. And that is also a process that's underway. A public hearing was held in late August, and I believe second public hearings on these two subjects are likely to be held on the 25th of this month, which I think is the day before the election. If not, those public hearings will be scheduled soon. And when the group's ready to make a report, they will bring that to your attention in the form of two ordinances.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Mr. Townsend, are you finished?
I am.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
So I noticed the meeting is not noticed on the town calendar. Is there a requirement to do like 14 or 15 days notice since it's a zoning hearing?
There's not necessarily a requirement that it be 14 days. We did have a public hearing to start with. I think that the notion's going to be that we're going to have a second public hearing, and that's what I said. So if we do notice a public hearing, we will give the appropriate amount of time.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's
Thank you very much.
not been determined. All right.
Any other questions for Mr. Townsend? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Townsend. I appreciate it. Actually, we're down to public comment. Do we have anybody online for public comment?
The only person is Dave Davis, but I believe he is waiting for agenda item number 1.
He's for item number 1. That's correct. So if we don't have public comment, we'll move on to item number 1. Review and discuss near-term and long-term recommendations by the Comprehensive Development Plan Committee. And Chairman Dave Davis is going to go over those with everybody. Mr. Davis, your mic is up. There you go.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
I want to say how much I personally and the commissioners in general really appreciate you taking the time to do this and taking the time to chair this committee. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks. It was kind of a fast year in that regard, wasn't it?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay. Would you like me to just step through the recommendations?
Yes, sir. I've been told I need to do a record time on meeting today, so you go right ahead.
I'll keep it real quick. Our first and only meeting for the year was scheduled, and we held it on August 28th, and virtually, of course. And you know, the members were okay with going through the town's recommendation or the town's audit of what they've completed, and taking out of that the different things that we thought were important from various people's perspective, and putting that together in this document. And so this is the culmination of that effort. It didn't take long to do. We walked down through all of the different check boxes and areas that the town's been working on. This is what we came up with. We separated into two categories. If you have access to the document, I'm looking at it here on my screen. Ashley, can you bring it up, or do the folks have a copy in front of them?
We were all.
We have a copy.
Have a copy.
Okay, very good. So broken into near term and longer term, near term being less than a year. And just let me walk down the list of the 5 near term recommendations. And if you have any questions or comments about each, please bring them up if you like. On the transportation category, there's been a lot of work done with the Route 1 corridor and elsewhere in town. We felt that the one thing that hasn't yet been done that we were aware of was an educational program for the residents and visitors about taking advantage of all the new benefits of the town transportation corridor. So that's a pretty easy one. I mean, that's something that could be handed off to the marketing.
Can I interject something, Mr. Davis? Would something like an info card that would be handed out at hotels and or at restaurants and or town hall, would that be an idea as an information getting to the visitors?
Well, sure. I think I'd leave it to the marketing committee or whoever's assigned this task to come up with the vehicle to do it. But yeah, that makes, obvious sense. So,
Thank you.
okay. Anybody else on that first one? Okay.
Go right ahead, sir.
On infrastructure, it seems like we're making good progress on, doing some important needed things in town on infrastructure, but I think we still lack a comprehensive plan for managing the infrastructure upgrades and maintenance for the entire town. And we ask that you assign the infrastructure committee the task of going about creating that master plan. We all acknowledge the need for it. It's time we got on it. Let's get it moving.
Any comments from the commissioner? Questions? Okay, Mr. Davis. Oh, no, Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, we already put it in the infrastructure committee's goals for them to prioritize the infrastructure projects around town. So it's already been commissioner approved. So we just need to remind them.
That's a good point, and we'll do that for within the next week here.
But is that a comprehensive plan for the town?
Yes, sir, I understand.
That's the question. And that's what we need. And Gary can speak to this. We've had extended discussions in various committees over the last couple of years about the need for a comprehensive plan for the town infrastructure. That's what we're asking for.
And we actually have something that goes back about 4 or 5 years. And there's a whole list of projects and a set of priority projects, but we need to revisit that and see if that in itself is a comprehensive plan or there needs to be something different. But
Right.
again, this does need to be revisited. It is a very important topic.
Indeed. So we're asking you to assign the infrastructure committee to begin post haste to develop that comprehensive plan. Okay, economic development. I think, having chaired the Budget and Finance Committee for a couple of years and being still a member of that committee, I think everyone acknowledges it's something that's not new. We've been talking about it for a long time. We need to find new ways to develop stable and predictable revenue streams. I know it's been a hot topic with the COVID situation and the, modifications to the budget to adapt to the shortfall this year. But obviously there's more to be done there, and that's, needs to be made more of a priority, let's say. Nobody should argue, right?
And Budget and Finance has certainly recognized that, and they will have some activities in that direction.
You bet. Specifically, I think, the hotel accommodations tax is one thing, and it will bring in a certain amount of revenue to the town once enacted fully. But, there are other things that we need to consider, given our not only our current situation, but our longer term needs. Okay, economic development. We've been talking about a capital improvements plan for the last couple of budget cycles. It's time we put one into place, and hopefully before the next budget cycle begins.
My capital improvements plan, you want to explain what you're suggesting there?
Yeah, for anything that's, significant expense for the town, making sure that we have a plan on replacement time for things, whether it's police cars or it's, you name it, large capital expenditures. I'm not a financial guy by trade, but, anything that's of a significant expense and a capital item for the town should be planned, and we should. Scott had done a thumbnail version of that, I think, in the last year to just get something down, but I think we need a much more thorough and complete plan there.
Mr. Davis, I think you're absolutely correct, and I'm glad this is being pushed because we've talked about it for a number of years, even way back before when I was on commission a long time ago. We talked about that needed to be included, but with the consistent turnover, it never got done. So I'm glad we're doing this now.
Right. And Dale, since we've known each other for 13 years, you can call me Dave. On the climate change and the sea level rise, and this is something that Gary had brought up in our discussion in the committee a couple weeks ago, that there is some revisitation of both the freeboard and the flood zone elevation issue. It may not be fully up to date or what we need it to be. So I don't know much about that issue per se, but of course that goes back to the either the infrastructure or the planning commission to begin looking in further into that.
Yeah, I think initially it's going to have to go back to the Charter and Code Review Committee to really sort out what the current status is of some of the both requirements and opportunities for homeowners in this regard. And then certainly planning and zoning has to be involved. And there are a whole series of activities, but this is an important topic. We really need to get this nailed down so that everybody, both the town and the property owners, understand what their responsibilities and opportunities are in this area.
Agreed.
This-
And
Go ahead, sir.
any further comments on those 5 recommendations to the council?
Well, I personally would like to comment that on the last item, the longer term item, sea level change and rise, or climate change and sea level rise, excuse me. That could change the whole face of the town, financially, economic planning, that could change everything in the town. So, we have to really pay attention to that and not just let it go over the long term, even while people, town managers, mayors and commissioners change, but we need to address it.
Well, you just scooped me, Dale, because I was just about to talk about that.
Sorry about that.
But everything you just said is no doubt true, and I probably couldn't have said it as well. It's only going to take one storm, and over the long haul, I think we all know the dangers of sea level rise. The town has it in the plan, but we've done little or nothing so far to begin preparations for that. And I think we just thought that at least the designation of either a task force or a committee that's devoted to looking into that further and coming up with some plans and recommendations is something that we could start. It's the first step in all of these things. So off we go.
Okay, Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, so the comp plan has some money, and last year they allocated some of that money to P&Z to look into the issues. Could we do something similar with infrastructure, since everyone agrees it's a critical issue, and take some of that money from the comp plan and help the infrastructure committee? Maybe they need professional help to put that list together. As Gary alluded to, from the Inland Bays, it's a huge document of all the possible projects, and some professional help could make sure a critical issue gets done if we could reallocate the funds.
I'll leave it to you guys. I'm sorry, Dale, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll leave it to you folks to designate who needs to get involved in that. And to my way of thinking, it justifies a complete separate task force or committee to begin looking into it. Infrastructure is going to be awfully busy on a comprehensive plan for infrastructure, let alone trying to take something like this on in any short-term timeframe.
Thank you. Commissioner Persinger.
I think, we have the recommendations. I think this needs to be a high priority topic on the next version of the town council after the election. And I want to thank the chair and the committee for coming together and developing these recommendations for us. I think we should remind everybody, these all come out of the comprehensive plan. And the whole purpose of this committee is to kind of push us along to make sure that we're providing appropriate recognition to what's in the comprehensive development plan, and actually make some progress. This is a 10-year plan. We're 2 years into that 10-year plan, and we are making progress. Part of the committee's role is to identify things that we're not working on but should be. But I think as time goes on, the committee should also focus on, are we doing enough? We may have started something, but are we doing enough? And what else do we need to do in order to really get to the end objective that's specified in the comp plan? So again, I want to thank the committee. I think this is important work, and thank the chair for presenting the recommendations today.
And I would suggest to the commissioners that, actually to the chair, through the commissioners, that if you agree that maybe we could have the chair and the liaison get together with the interim town manager and possibly the mayor and actually start to make some recommendations that we've mentioned now on how to progress with these recommendations, because the committee has been good enough to agree to continue to meet, not just develop the comp plan, but to continue to meet and talk about encouraging, I'll use that word, the commissioner to sort of get off our doubts and stop just talking about things and actually do something. So I hope that the committee will continue to, after getting together with the liaison and the town manager and myself maybe, and giving us, and let's get a plan together and actually, so we continue to sort of put a foot in the rear end of whoever's in charge of making these things happen, to make them happen. Does that sound all right, Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, if you'd like me to coordinate that, I'm happy to. If you'd like Gary or Jim or, yourself to spearhead that, I'm okay with that too. Just keep me posted on how you'd like to proceed in that respect.
I personally, now I'm asking the commissioners, I personally would think it would be a good idea to have the chairman and the liaison get together and sort of push the mayor and the town manager into making things happen with the other committees. So please do so, unless we have any other ideas from commissioners.
Happy to work with Commissioner Persinger in that regard.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, folks. If that's all, I'll sign off and let you continue on your agenda.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Okay. Next item, item number 2, discuss and possibly vote to approve a salary range for the town manager position. Commissioner Moskowitz, you have your hand up.
Yeah, my initial thoughts are 70 to 105 would fit in perfectly based on what other towns are doing. It's just, I believe the departed town manager's salary was too high on the high end, and 70 to 105 puts us for a good candidate. And then if we really get a candidate and we decide to go higher, we can always do that. But I think that's a great range.
Well, I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to go to Commissioner Jazinski, who had his hand up. I tend to agree with that. I put down 75 to 105 after looking at things and thinking about it myself. So, Commissioner Jazinski, what's your thought?
Well, the first thing I'd say is, are we required to give a salary range rather than just saying commensurate with experience? And the reason I say that is we could get a more junior candidate who is kind of a rock star, and we think they're the right fit for Dewey, and we would be kind of bounded by a range. And while they may not insist on the top of the range, they're going to want to go well into it when their experience doesn't really justify it. Similarly, we could also get a very seasoned rock star who's used to making more than that, who is like, well, if this is the top of the salary range, I'm not even applying. So I kind of have a thought process that we just want to be commensurate with experience. And then when we look at who the actual candidates are and what experience they have, then we make a determination of how much we'll pay if we're allowed to do it. It's a question. I don't know in the public sector if we can do it that way.
Any other comments, Commissioner Jazinski? Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Bauer first.
Yeah, I agree with David Jazinski on this one. I don't see a reason why we would want to put ourselves in a box. I mean, the goal is to find the best town manager we can. So by limiting what we're willing to pay, are we also willing to let someone walk who needs $1,000 more? It could make a different decision to us. So my thought is, let's make it commensurate with the experience level. And that might be part of what the committee's going to do is weed out saying, hey, I think this person based on their past history is going to be it's going to be too much. I think we can get an excellent candidate at this kind of price. But I'd rather the committee do it than the commissioners. I mean, ultimately, we're going to agree on, we have to allocate what we're going to pay this person. But I think it's putting the cart before the horse.
Commissioner Moskowitz, you had your hand.
So if we proceed the way David and Paul suggest, the way to do it is when the committee does the interviews, they shouldn't weed out anyone, and they just ask everyone during their interviews, what is your expected salary? And this way, and they just put it down and then give it to the commissioners. So this way we have an idea of what salary range, or they could say, what is your expected salary range? Most companies will do that. And this way we have an idea ahead of time. So we're not wasting someone's time if they're expecting 250,000 and it's not paying that. And I just think that I have no issue doing it Dave and Paul's way, just, we just need to ask what's your expected salary.
So you kind of waffled back, and I'm going to go to Commissioner Persinger just shortly. But Commissioner Moskowitz, I need to explain, are you saying yes, we should have a salary range like you suggested earlier? Are you suggesting no now? We should?
After hearing David and Paul's arguments, I tend to agree with what they're saying. And I just think the easiest thing is for the committee to ask, what's your expected salary
All
or
right.
expected salary range?
All right,
And then just
Commissioner
write it down
Persinger.
and pass it to the commissioners.
All right, Commissioner Persinger, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with the proposed approach by Commissioner Jazinski. I think that makes a lot of sense. We have all the background information I think we need to make a judgment on our own. We know what other jurisdictions are paying. So, we have that kind of information behind us, so we can make a judgment based on any given individual's qualifications. I think it does, and Commissioner Moskowitz raised this issue. I think it does raise the issue of what we're asking the search committee to do. Are we asking them to screen out anyone on the basis of salary? And if we give them a salary range, then I think they would do that. I think it's probably better for them to find the best candidates and then pass them along to us. And then, we can make our judgments then and be able to judge what's an appropriate salary for any given candidate.
All right, I'm going to make a comment, then I'm going to ask Commissioner Jazinski, he had his hand up. I don't know how you can go how the committee could go any further other than interviewing people and their judgment of whether they were qualified or not. How could they possibly go any further if we don't give them a salary range to talk about? I mean, every other time that I know about, we gave them a salary range and then we negotiated the final contract, the commissioner and the mayor did. So I'm not quite sure how the committee could go any further other than interviewing and giving a judgment call on those people that they interviewed. Commissioner Jazinski.
Well, the thing I would like to say is if we're going to go with a commensurate, we should definitely have the committee do what Commissioner Moskowitz suggested.
I'm sorry, say that again, sir.
If we are going to go with a commensurate with experience approach, we should definitely instruct the committee to ask the salary expectation question that Commissioner Moskowitz outlined. It's important for us to understand what people's expectations are. To your point about how they could go further, in the private sector, this is very, very common, very common. Public sector, probably a lot less, but private sector, very common to not limit yourself. And what I would offer is that I suspect anyone who truly is qualified to do this job kind of has an idea of the range that these jobs pay. So I'm not terribly concerned with us not getting a candidate because we're not saying the range up front.
Is there any other comment? I hear everybody saying we don't want to vote on a salary range right now. So although I'll get to you, Mr. Dede, just 1 second. And Commissioner Persinger also, I'll get you start. I personally think we need a salary range, but I'm not going to force that issue. I can't. I don't have the votes, and so I'm outnumbered here. But I think we're making a mistake if we don't have some kind of low and top level salary range. Mr. Dede, you have your hand up. Your mic's off, Mr. Dede.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Am I, okay. Coming from the public sector, that's a very common question when you do interviews for higher department heads. And we always have given a salary range, and we've said it's been, but where we would lock in the salary was based upon their experience. It's a common question. I've sat in interviews with town managers in the past, and it's a common question they ask you, what is the salary range? Now, I would assume from any person interviewing that individual, the answer would be kind of a muffled question. Well, we're going to send it to the commissioners. Now, if somebody comes in with an outlandish, which is not unreasonable to believe that somebody may come in with a salary of 150, is that a reasonable expectation to send it to the commissioners? So these are the kinds of things I think it's going to come up in an interview panel.
Yeah, Commissioner Persinger.
I was just gonna say, I mean, we have a search committee. I think they can make some judgments about what's a reasonable salary level being requested by any given candidate. You know, as Jim just said, you know, if somebody comes in at 150 or 175,000, even if they love this candidate, they may still pass them along, but they clearly point out to commissioners that this is a very high, maybe unrealistic salary level that's being requested. I think they should have the benefit of the survey information. In fact, if they just have to go to the meeting materials for today to look at this salary survey information, I think it's very informative. And, you know, again, in there, I think this kind of information can influence them in their judgment about what candidate may or may not be a reasonable candidate. I think everyone's aware of what our former town manager made. I think, again, they're all reasonable individuals, and they can make some judgments about, you know, reasonable or unreasonable salary requests for any given candidate.
Thank you, sir. I will not be the last one to speak. I guarantee you, I won't wait and speak after every person. But my final comment on this would be that I don't understand how anybody on the committee could give a salary range. They wouldn't have a clue as to what the commissioner would be, in general, be willing to pay and what the town would be willing to pay. They'd be making a wild guess at it, and because we haven't given them a range. But Commissioner Jazinski, you had your hand up before.
I don't have any, I've already said what I had to say on the matter.
Okay.
So
Are there any other comments? Commissioner Bauer?
Why don't we pass along that salary survey that we did? Give that to the committee.
Okay, that certainly can be done. Anybody else have any other, Commissioner Persinger?
Yeah, that was my suggestion as well.
Okay. Any other comments from anybody?
just an unrelated comment, Gary, I got a notification you're the host now, so you may get a notification that Ashley's trying to get back in.
Oh, okay.
Just letting you know. Okay.
All right.
Well, okay, well then we won't vote on the salary range, and we will forward the salary survey that you all were forwarded for information to the committee. And I will discuss with Julie how she plans to do it, and she can watch this part of the meeting and understand how we would like her to do it, would like her to run that. So the next item, number 3, discuss the August financial report and the COVID-19 budget scenarios. Mr. Didies, could you give us a general update and then take questions, please?
I would be happy to, but I want to remind you, I haven't been elevated to the position of commissioner yet.
I'm sorry, did I say commissioner? Interim town manager, I apologize.
I'll take that. Thank you.
And that may not be an elevation.
I don't know. I look at it differently, maybe.
Mr. Persinger is smiling a lot, so.
Anyway, if you look at your balance sheet that was given, the revenue in August, we collected $484,000 and we were budgeted $454,000. So we collected $33,000 over budget. The actuals for the year were $1.886 million. We were budgeted $1.96 million, so we're behind by about $74,000 for actuals. Expenses, we had the actuals were $369,000. We were budgeted $411,000, and we were under budget by $41,800. Year to date, where we stand, the actuals that we've collected are 1.728. We've been budgeted 1.775, and we're under budget by $47,000. The differential overall is we're about $158,000 behind. This year, I want to point out that we had an unexpected amount of money that came in this year through our transfer tax, which really helped bolster our revenues. And that came into about $147,000, which was really unexpected. But it really substantially helped our revenue stream. As far as looking at some of the notes that I was given by Sheena, and I'd like to take some credit, but she provided me with some information as far as the accommodations, just to remind people The majority of the monies for the accommodations tax will not be until October, maybe November. Our daily permits, our 5-year average for the month in September looks to be above average. We were below average in our building permits this year, this past month, but we do have some potential projects that are coming up that look very, very good for us. For example, we've got, right now, we've got on Cullen Street, we've got 2 existing building lots that may go to 3. We've got a potential buyer that has approached us with some information. On Clayton Street, there are 2 vacant buildable ocean lots, and there's some inquiry to buy those lots. And these are upcoming potential revenues coming in, not only for transfer tax and some demolition as well, and some of the other properties. Rodney Avenue, we have a home is already that was demolished, and we expect that to be a substantial increase in costs for construction. There are 2 upcoming homes on Barrett Avenue that Dawn, our building official, has been very involved in. So it looks like we've got some potential increases in revenue that would be unexpected at this time of year. And that's where we stand as far as the budget, where we are at this point in time. Dave?
Yeah, so,
Wait a minute, Commissioner Jasinski and Mr. Moskowitz had his hand up originally first and then you, sir.
Sure.
Go ahead, Commissioner Moskowitz.
Do you know with the parking, what the lag is from when the report gets done and it gets reported?
You mean as far as what was been done? No, I
Yeah,
don't know.
so for instance, like Park Mobile, like if people pay up to 831, is it reflected in this report or is it like?
We are about a month behind in the Parkeon, and I believe that's coming in, that'll be in the September reports. So from what I gathered, it's already in. I didn't get the actual figures. She's got it, but it wasn't in time to put it for this budget meeting.
Okay, yeah, I'm just worried that this budget picture puts too rosy a thing, and once all the final numbers are total, we're still going to be a good few hundred, 500,000-600,000 in the red, and it's
Well, that gets to our COVID discussion, I assume.
Yeah.
At some point.
But I'll defer to Commissioner Jasinski.
Commissioner Jasinski, go right ahead. And then Commissioner Bauer.
So, Mr. Dides, I noticed you said the rental licenses were 60% of the yearly rental licenses. Do any people buy rental licenses before the beginning of the budget year? So in other words, is it possible that there's more than that percent of 2021 licenses because they paid early in February or something like that? Or is it really just 60%?
I would defer to maybe Ashley, who handles all those funds.
Yeah, we
And
get a
Kevin.
lot in the month of March because the residential rental licenses are due April 1st.
Okay,
So end of February, beginning of March, we get quite a bit in that's processed and put into that fiscal year.
okay. So
Commissioner, that's the same with the business license.
Exactly.
Business
So
licenses due March 1st. So we generally
Yes.
get them January and February.
right. So the key point I take from that data point, Ms. Hudson, which I appreciate you sharing with us, is that we should not have the expectation that there's only 60% of the accommodations
Right.
tax rental volume coming in because some of those licenses were issued in the previous budget year.
Right, and accommodations tax for the summer rentals is due October 15th.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, let me, just so I understand the numbers exactly. Where are we? What is the number that we're off P&L wise year to date?
Off to date, I believe we are about 30. Give me a second. I apologize since this is the first time I've actually taken a look at this. Right now, expenses, we're about $46,000 below our projected expectation.
So we're
Year to date.
We're only off our budget by $46,000.
Right now, but that's not going to hold.
Okay, so what expenses do we have? That leads me to my next question. What expenses are we going to have now until the end of the year that we could maybe take a look at, curbing before we get, I'd love to see this year end up $46,000.
But no,
Off budget.
yeah, we would too.
Hold on 1 second, Mr. Dides, Commissioner Bauer. I'd just like to remind you, we're talking apples and oranges here. We're not talking about overall, I mean, for instance, there's hundreds of $1,000s worth of accommodation tax due in that
Understood.
may never come
Right.
in. We're talking about lost income, not necessarily expenses.
Right.
Yeah,
Understood.
I'm sorry, Mr. Didi.
I would say that we've probably almost maxed out as far as what we've cut back in the expenses. The season's ending. Well, obviously, we're going to lose the season, what's left of seasonal police.
Right.
And
I mean, our
as far
expenses
as-
start to drop now, correct?
they're going to
Until-
start dropping. Yes.
Right,
Yes.
which is
But I think,
positive.
I think we've seen a substantial reduction up to date, but we'll see a little bit more come by sometime by September. Most notably, you'll see it all in the October.
So the October one. But
Right.
it's good to know that, we're not very far off, and that's primarily attributable to the up in transfer tax, right? And building permits.
Well, that was unexpected, to be honest with you.
Right. Oh, you like to
Now,
get surprised.
I'd like
in
to see that
favorable way
happen for
sometimes.
this coming month, and sales are always, it's something we can't predict.
Right, understood. All right, so there's really no other expenses we should be looking at that we haven't looked at between now and the end of the fiscal year.
Well, we are going to have some increases in expenses in the sense of, for example, the life-saving station's roof. We're getting some,
Okay.
I think we'll have some estimates by next week.
All right, and we also gonna have revenue coming in for the new lighthouse that's gonna get built, right? Did they submit permits yet?
The permits have not been submitted for the lighthouse yet. We have for the restaurant, yes, but we've pretty much maxed out on them. They already submitted the permits earlier on before the fire came in. The lighthouse would be the only one that we're going to be expecting, but I don't think we've gotten anything as far as a final on that at this point.
All right, so we're gonna have more money coming in before the end of our fiscal year on that project as well.
Depending on the cost, yes.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, the transfer tax, there's good times and bad times. Mortgage rates are down. More people may be buying this month, but it doesn't mean it could be instead of buying in future months, they're buying now. So, I mean, that's why when we get transfer tax, we usually set aside some of that money for bad times. So, I mean, I just think we're going to be down before all is said and done. And besides the life-saving station roof, you also have the police cars. We should be, in theory, buying a police car every year because you have, I believe, 8 full-time officers, 8 cars, 9 cars, and you figure each car lasts between 6 to 8 years. So if we don't pay for a car this year, we may be paying for 2 cars next year. And I understand there's some grant money, but everything costs money, and we need to map out what our expenses actually are. I just don't believe that saying we're going to be down 50 grand or 100 and saying transfer tax helped us. I think in 2-3 months, you're going to see it's going to be a much more negative number. But I mean, we understood that this year is going to be this year. The other thing is COVID-19 a multi-year pandemic. So we have to start up planning for next year and how we're going to do things next year budget-wise.
I would agree with what Commissioner Moskowitz has said. I think the idea of having, it goes back to the initial discussion with the comprehensive plan that Dave Davis presented is we do need a very robust development of our capital improvement and capital expenditures and police cars and that all comes into effect. We've got other issues as well as far, not including just the police cars. We've got some maintenance issues that have to be addressed. We're looking at even this building here. We haven't even begin to look at the issue about a new town hall at some point. And we've got some problems over at the annex building. So these are some of the things that we really need to plan for and have some idea of what's the priority versus what we can put on the back burner. And we also have some money still, as I understand it, we've got about $60,000 or $70,000 in LESO funds that we've tapped in we've been very cautious and we go to you. But for example, in a bad year, potentially even this year, if we needed to buy a police car, it seems to me that would be a way to look at this and use the LESO fund, not tapping into our general fund at this point. So.
Commissioner Bauer, you had your hand up, and then Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I'd like to make a suggestion. I mean, there's some things that we're gonna need to buy. You know, and can we just tell the budget and finance group here that, you know, the committee should be aware of some of the predicted expenses we're gonna have capital wise, right? So for example, David mentioned about one or two new police cars. I'm not sure the chief has said do we need one or two new police cars, or you know, let's find out what people are going to need going into next year, and let's get a head start on this thing and not wait until February, March and say, hey, yeah, we're going to need a new police car in a week. You know, if we know we're going to need it now, if we're bringing it up in this meeting, it tells me that we probably believe that we're really going to need it. So let's plan to buy it. And, you know, if we don't need it, yeah, I'd rather the department heads be telling us what they need versus us telling them what they need.
You're absolutely correct about that. Commissioner Persinger.
Well, yeah, clearly the department head should be expressing their needs so that we can begin to plan for that. And buying police cars is a capital expenditure. That's what we talked about earlier. We need a budget for that. And we've talked about that for some time. We have some reserve funds, and we've made some reallocation of some of the money that we had set aside for future needs. Had we not been struck by the virus pandemic, I certainly, for one, would have made some recommendations how to begin establishing that capital expenditure fund from some of the reserve funds that we have already. I think we need to take a pretty hard look at where we really are in terms of the budget and where we think we're going to be over the next several months. And I don't know if, Mayor, would it be appropriate if we transition into talking about the pandemic effects, the COVID-19 scenarios?
It's under this item. Go right ahead, sir.
All right. I've been taking a quick look at that. The places where we're really getting hurt are in parking. That's both in the daily permits and particularly in the parking meters. And it's unfortunately a little misleading to look at the 5-year averages with respect to the parking meters, because as Park Mobile has become more important over the last several years, it's accounting for a much bigger percentage of the revenues that we get from parking. We also aren't looking in the comparisons here that in these scenarios, we're not looking at the effect of the parking rate increases that we made. And when you do that, we're actually pretty well behind. We're only at about, if you look at the parking meter revenues, we're only at about, I think, 46% of what we had projected for the entire year. You know, as of September 15th, we're not going to get any more parking revenues this year. There will be some lags in terms of the money that we receive perhaps from Park Mobile and from Parking Island, but by and large, we're just not going to be able to collect much more revenue from parking. So we're going to be lucky, I think, if we hit a 70% of what we budgeted in terms of parking meters. And I'm looking at maybe 75% perhaps for the daily parking permits. We've already capped out at 87% of what we projected for the seasonal permits. So it's a big hit. What may save us, at least in some regard, is the transfer taxes. It really is a pretty active real estate market right now. I don't have a lot of, we may actually hit 100% of what we projected this year. We could even exceed that, which would again help us a good bit as well. If you take our revenue picture, we could be down anywhere from $450,000 to $600,000 in terms of what we expected in revenue. We actually got an additional $100,000 that we didn't expect from DBE this year. So that has to be factored in. If you look on the expenditure side, there's some things that are getting counted as expenditures that shouldn't be. Payoff of the Baird Avenue loan. There are a couple of other things in there as well. Begin to look at all these things in pluses and negatives. I think still by the end of the year, we're going to be in a $200,000 to $300,000 hole that we're going to have to fill. So I think we're going to have that discussion. I think it's a little premature to start talking about capital expenditures until we get a better handle on the budget. At least that's my view at this point. But again, I don't think it's at all unreasonable to think we're going to be in a $200,000 to $300,000 hole based on what we anticipated in the budget and what we projected for the year. So I think we need to think a little more seriously about how we're going to cover that gap.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jasinski. Your mic is off, sir.
Here we go. Just kind of concurring pretty much with what Gary said. It's clear to me just because of the cycle of revenues, we'll pretty much know where we are at the November meeting. The October meeting, there'll still be some things kind of trickling in. And, I think we really need to dig into the current year and next year numbers, starting with the November meeting, where we'll really have a good picture of our current year revenue situation. And that'll help impart what things may be like next year, depending on how this COVID thing evolves.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Dedes, you had your hand up?
I'm not a commissioner, Mayor, but
I said Mr. Dedes.
I didn't hear you properly. I agree with what Commissioner Jasinski and Commissioner Persinger reiterated earlier. I also just generally looking at this, and I will say I am a layman, but I can understand that it looks like we're going to be at least probably $200,000 to $300,000 unless something drastically changes behind in our budget. Our former town manager, Scott, came up with questions for consideration. And I think this is probably a good time to start really taking a look at how do you want to make up a potential deficit. And Mayor, you and I chatted a little bit about it earlier, that maybe this is something that we could also ask the Budget and Finance Committee to help to weigh in a little bit on, to get some additional input and some thoughts on this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dedes. I agree. I always say I'm not the type of person to run things by committee. In other words, I think committees drive you crazy. I think committees mean well, but they can't make the final decision is what I'm getting around to. Commissioners, you have to make the final decision how we're going to make up any budget loss. You have to make the final decision of where we're going to cut costs and how we're going to improve the income. You have to make the final decision where we're going to get the $200,000 to $300,000 that we seem to agree, or we're looking like we agree we're going to be short this year on our overall budget. So we have what, $1 million worth of investments right now. We have 200,000 that's about to be transferred over to that investment fund. We have to decide how we're going to do that, and I would like you to start thinking about that, please. And I know you are. I know I'm not telling you anything new, but I just want to re-emphasize that. Mr. Dedes, any comment?
No, sir.
Mr. Persinger.
Yeah, I think what interim town manager Jim Dedes is suggesting.
Thank
Get it
you.
right that time. Is that we begin to, we go to Budget and Finance and ask them what their opinions are about the various ways that we might close the gap. It doesn't make sense to go get a commercial line of credit. I know that Scott Koenig did take a look at that. He actually had a quote for a commercial line of credit. I'm actually kind of fond of finding a way to borrow from ourselves and then agreeing to pay it back at a reasonable interest rate. And it wouldn't have to come from the beach replenishment fund. It could come from some of those reserves that the mayor referred to. Or are we just willing to fill in the gap just by taking it from reserves and then moving forward with that? But I think Budget and Finance could certainly weigh in. They could give us their opinion on what's the best way to proceed here. So I think that is a reasonable task to take to them.
Thank you, sir. Any Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yeah, I think the interim town manager would need to go through the list of proposed cuts because some of them are past us being able to cut them. In June, I had wanted, for instance, to have the lifeguards on every other stand, and the departed town manager's plan was to get rid of lifeguards after August 15th, which didn't happen, and for good reason. So, I mean, some of the cuts being proposed are viable. Some are already too late. So I think the best way is for the interim town manager to go through that list and just make it easy and simple for the Budget and Finance Committee. These are like 10 things we can do to cut money. What's your feedback on them? And get their input. Just so it's a relevant list and not something that looking at that we can't do anymore.
You're not talking about now, you're talking about as a suggestion to the committees before they meet.
Yes, and it may have to be really cuts for next summer potentially if COVID is still around. Like what sort of cuts do you foresee the town should make or be making Because I mean, there's a lot of choices. The commissioners, like you said, have the final say, but it's helpful to have other people's opinions on how to proceed.
That's correct. Any other comments from the other commissioner? Hearing none, then we'll move on. Interim town manager comment.
Yeah, I just want to point out, it kind of goes to the discussion of the comprehensive plan with sea level rise, and indirectly it's related. We've had a lot of concerns from property owners about flooding on some of the streets and stormwater and collecting. And it seems to have gotten more this year than we've heard in the past few years. I had a discussion with DelDOT about the crown of the road of being above some of the properties, and is there anything that we can do with the state or us individually to help alleviate some of the problems that these property owners are having? And I think that's something we need to take a look at. And mainly it's coming from the north side, Ocean side, those streets, St. Louis, West Street. And I think, as a matter of fact, I would like to point out, we had a most recent one over on Sweet Street and Salisbury Street where there was some flooding. So it seems to be getting worse, and all the permeable requirements we have not been making much of an impact on stormwater drainage and just natural drainage. But it's very disheartening to hear people say what they say, and that there's very little we can do because it's really on their private property, and it's not on our or the state's or ours, what we would consider our property. But it's coming more and more, and I think we need to take a look at that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dedes. Anything else?
No, that'll be it.
Thank you. Commissioner Bauer, your comment.
No comments at this time.
Commissioner Jazinski. Your mic is off.
All right, I keep muting my thing to be respectful. No comments.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, just 7 years ago, I looked forward to helping the town do the marketing committee and social media. They said we had an issue with the investments, and they put me as investment committee chair, and I'm like, had no idea what to expect, and it was a mess. Wrong share class, wrong commission, whatever. Helped the town out. We made 1.1 million, and then 2 years ago, I ran for office. I literally did not expect to do it. I did it, and it's been a great 2 years. And the only thing the one thing I actually realized, the lighted crosswalks was one of my big things, and I really wanted it, but I didn't realize I'd be using it so much for when I walk my baby in a stroller, and being able to press that button at like when I go for an afternoon walk and have the car stop. You have no idea how you would use it, but it's just, that's a perfect, I love being commissioner for the last 2 years, and regardless what happens, I hope everyone stops me and say hi on the street.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Persinger.
I have no comments. Thank you.
Comes down to the last comment from Mayor Dale H. Cook, and just general comments that expenses are coming down the road, and I want everybody to understand that. Sea level rise is real. Flooding is real. We've had more and more problems where the state has said more and more often, that's not our problem, that's your problem. We just had one the other day where they told us one street, sorry, that's on our maps, that's an entrance to its subdivision, and that's your problem, not our problem. And talking about repaving an area, a thing like a pothole. So, you know, we're going to be spending more money in the future. The town needs to be able to understand that they have to have that money to spend. We have to spend it wisely. So let's be careful. If there's no other comments, I'll call for
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
by Moskowitz and Bauer. Thank you very much, commissioners. We appreciate everything. Mr. Townsend, thank you very much for everything.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Later.
After-